First of all, thank you very much for talking with us with VOA. I would like to start, of course, with the Fed decision. So the Fed just announced the 75 base point interest rate hike. This is the fourth rate hike since March. We know the White House has been telling us that consumer spending is still good, the jobs still growing in the past 3 months, so we are not heading to a recession. But Secretary Yellen also admitted the economy is cooling down. How effective do you estimate this rate hike potentially have more to come to provide a soft landing but not leading us into recession?
What the Federal Reserve is doing here is aggressively attacking a problem that President Biden addresses every time he talks about the economy, and that is the unacceptably high level of consumer inflation. We know the Fed has pivoted to aggressive rate hikes to dampen these price pressures, and the president has every faith in their ability to do so. In fact, he reappointed Chair Powell, who was then confirmed by Congress, so that's a pretty solid endorsement of his faith in the chair. The other thing that we do here at the White House, given the president's guidance, is really respect the Fed's independence. If you look at the history of Federal Reserves when they're in rate hiking cycles like they are now, that is raising interest rates, presidents have sometimes gotten up in their grill, as it were, and tried to get them to do less of that. Certainly our predecessor, President Trump, did that. We don't mess with their knitting that way. We have a lot of respect for their independence and understand that they are the first and foremost inflation-fighting institution in the economy.
Well, meanwhile, as you know, respecting the Fed's independence, will the White House prepare for possibly leading to a recession, and how would you tackle that if that leads to that?
What we're trying to do is follow the president's, again, his dispatch to his economics team, which is do everything we can to address his number one economic priority, and that's bringing down inflation. So all that we're doing is toward that goal. So for example, a few months ago, the president oversaw the release of 180 million barrels of oil from our strategic reserves. That's an oil reserve that the nation holds. He organized some of our global partners to add 60 million barrels to that. Thus far, over 120 million barrels of oil have come out of the strategic reserve, and our energy department just announced another 20 million coming into the market. Now, look, energy is a global price, but there's no question that that release is one of the reasons why gas prices have fallen steeply over the past 40 days or so, down over 70 cents a gallon from their peak. Now, at $4.30 nationally, per gallon, that's still too high. I don't want to oversell this by nobody's taking a victory lap here. That's still too high. But if you're a family with a couple of drivers, that's a savings of $60 a month. If you aggregate that over the population, that's about 260 million per day in savings. That's a little bit of breathing room, and this president's fingerprints are on that. It's one of the kind of actions that I'm talking about in this context.
Yes, Chairman Powell actually just said it today, just a couple of minutes ago, saying inflation is much too high. So of course we know that, like you mentioned, it's could be caused by a supply chain disruption, global COVID shutdown, the war in Ukraine. But right now we are seeing the war will probably continue for a while. Besides the COVID, right now we are seeing next global health threat, the monkeypox is coming up. As the White House prepare for the inflation might continue to rise, especially we're seeing China has a zero COVID policy, resulting in a lot of business shutdown. What are the tools you have to tackle maybe future inflation continue to rise?
Yeah, this is an important question. There's a lot of uncertainty out here. I've talked to you about the decline in the gas price, but that, given the uncertainties you mentioned, particularly the war in Ukraine, that could reverse. We know that Putin, in his unjust and vicious attack on the sovereign nation of Ukraine, has weaponized the use of energy, particularly with Europe. So all those uncertainties are in the mix. What we have to do is keep our head down and try to implement the policies that President Biden is guiding us forward on. Now, I talked about the release of oil to help make sure that we have an adequate supply there. Another effort, which relates directly to your question, is working with our G7 partners to put a cap on the price of Russian oil. This is an initiative that, to cut to the chase, would keep Russian oil on the market, so it would maintain the stability of the supply of oil while depriving Putin of the revenues he needs to prosecute his unjust and illegal war. That's another policy that we're working on with G7 partners. With the Congress, we're trying to get lower prescription drug costs for Americans. Do you know that Americans, particularly our seniors, pay 2 to 3 times more for prescription drugs than people in other countries for the same prescription drug, for the same pill? That's because we have these foolish laws that are very much in support of big pharma, but not in support of American families, that prohibit Medicare for negotiating for lower prices. The president wants to take that off the table and make sure that Medicare can negotiate, stop doing big favors to big pharma, and start seeing big price relief for American seniors.
Yes, Ms. Bernstein, next I want to, talk about American family reliefs. Will some of the, relief from the tariff of the Chinese goods be helpful for U.S. consumers?
Our trade negotiator, Catherine Tai, she runs our USTR, she's our United States trade representative, have talked about those tariffs in terms of leverage in dealing with a competitor that doesn't always play by the rules of fair trade. So we have to be mindful of the geopolitical implications of tariff additions and reductions. And ultimately, the president is just not going to expose American workers, particularly in the manufacturing sector, a sector that's done quite well in recent months and quarters, to unfair competition. So there are various stakeholders in play.
I have one last question about the CHIPS Act. So we know the CHIPS Act, Senate just passed it, and but we know for a lot of Taiwanese and South Korean companies, semiconductor companies investing in United States right now. But for those countries, semiconductor industry is also a high national interest and linked to their national security. So right now we see some people in Taiwan are worrying they're going to lose their edge to the world, including the United States, lose interest to protect its democracy if the global supply chain is constructed. So what is your approach when you're engaging with the Taiwanese companies to reassure that it's all right to work with the United States and bring the cutting edge chips to the United States?
Well, look, I mean, we used to provide about 40% of global computer chips. Now it's gone down to about 10%. In fact, some of the more high-tech chips that are essential for not just our cars and all of our machinery and tools, but for our national security. I think it was Secretary Raimondo pointed out there are 250 chips in a Javelin missile launcher. We get 90% of those chips, at least, from other countries, Taiwan in particular. So our national security in part depends on standing up a domestic semiconductor industry. We are an extremely open economy relative to all the rest when it comes to others coming here to build fabrication foundries, chip fabs, and we're very welcoming to anyone who wants to do so. You know that Intel, South Korea, as of yesterday, the Taiwanese have all talked about building factories here, and the president is very much open to that kind of investment. But the key fact is that we need to have a domestic supply source of these critically important chips, and this act is essential to make that happen.